Calmness is about balance, physical, mental, spiritual, and when all these are in balance, including the financial, we can find our center of calmness. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Center of Calmness. And tonight, we are super blessed to have Zach Pritchard with us. Welcome, Zach.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Now, as I understand it, you're calling in from the Dallas area overall. How are things up there?
Everything's going good. Weather's actually turning out to be pretty nice, and things are kind of cooling off, and just been pretty good.
That's awesome. Same here. I'm not that far away from you. Unlike a lot of these opportunities here, I'm usually several thousand miles away, but in this case, we're pretty close.
Yeah, for sure.
Me dialing in from Houston here. So if I could ask, we're talking about financial solutions today and how those can impact emotional calmness. Of course, the person's finances can have tremendous impact on calmness. How did you get started, if I could ask, Zach, on your financial journey that got you to this point where you're offering the coaching services and everything?
Yeah, so, I mean, just to go back all the way, even in high school, watching my parents, deal with their finances and struggle and, living paycheck to paycheck. And I just kind of started thinking there's got to be another way. And so as I progressed in that thought, I started, listening and finding other ways to do it. And so I heard about Dave Ramsey and kind of dove into his teachings and kind of started following him through college and, graduated college and just kept diving in, kept learning as much as I could. And so by the end of it, by the time I graduated and got my first job, I was, I loved every bit of the information. So it was really helpful to me in our life to just have that peace of mind that I've got some money set aside. I've, had a brand new baby and a new marriage. And so there's that level of peace that it gave me to, start saving for emergencies and stuff like that. So it just really helped me so much that I started teaching it. And I kept teaching it, year after year. And as I was working another job, and once that job ended, I was like, well, I've been doing this for a few years now, so why not make it a full-time thing? So now I just kind of go about it a different way, but that's kind of the short and brief summary of how I got to where I'm at. So
that's very cool. And you're talking about applying Dave Ramsey principles during perhaps some of the most difficult times of life, right? You're financing a college education, you're starting those new jobs, maybe moving, new wife, new child, a lot of
the above, yeah,
all included. How did you find, if just to ask this straight up, how did you find the strength to both find your path on those principles and then apply those in those difficult situations?
So, I mean, I knew the path that I was heading was going to lead me right to where my parents were, and they were filing bankruptcy when I was in college. So I knew if I stayed doing what we were doing, I was just going to be right there behind them. And then, I had the new baby, and I was like, no, I'm not. Like, I've got to do something different for our family. And, I kind of put my head down. I'm one of those focused guys, and once I get focused on a goal, like, there's no stopping me, and I'm going to go all out. So, and that was one thing, like, I had to draw that line in the sand in college and say, I'm following these principles, no more debt. And so, we just had to do it. Did what I had to do to make the college tuition work while we were there, and then paid it off once we got done. So
I gotcha. So did you maintain your college at the same schedule as you would have if you would have allowed a debt to come into it, or did you have to end up prolonging the process?
I maintained it, and so it just made me work a little more. So I was working 3 to 4 jobs at a time, plus going to school full time. And so I was paying for me and my wife's tuition at the same time. So, it was, while we had some grants and stuff that took care of some of it, but for the most part, all the tuition came out of my pay plus our living expenses. So, it just made me work a little bit more. I didn't have much of a life in college.
I understand. That's a worthwhile sacrifice for just a few years, and you're already married. So a lot of that extra time commitments are kind of pre-planned, right? That's not too bad.
Yeah, for sure. So when we had our kid early in that process too, so it just made it. I felt like I had to step up and do what I knew I needed to do. So
that's very good. So when you graduated college, did you graduate with zero debt and some money in the bank, or how effective were the Ramsey principles as you brought them forward?
So when we started his process in January 2011, we had about 22 in student loans, and then we had another probably 10 in car loan and some other stuff. But we didn't, from January 2011 to May of 2013, we didn't add any more debt. We actually sold the car and got rid of it, and was able to bump down a little bit. We didn't graduate debt free, but we didn't add any more. So we were able to pay the rest of the school in cash and not have to add any more debt to the process. So
I gotcha.
It definitely helps because it was a semester and a half, and we already had 22 grand of debt. So you can just imagine as that accumulated. I mean, we could have been up in the 60 to 70 range pretty quick.
Oh, easily, especially with 2 tuitions, even with single living expense. That's it builds up so fast these days. I can't imagine the tuition burden, and then of course you got all the emotional components of going through all of those different life changes, as well as the college experience itself and 4 jobs. So once you managed to, if you will, stop the bleeding on the debt, how did that shift your emotional state? How did that make you feel?
I mean, it was kind of hard. I mean, in that process, I was on the ground just running so hard that I don't know that I ever really stopped to ask that question to myself. I would say that, I love this world now because I don't do as much, or I didn't do as much self-awareness or self-communication at that time as I do now, because I was still young and a little bit prideful, and so I don't need that kind of stuff. I'm a guy. I'm prideful. I'm a man. I can take it. But nowadays, it's more of like you have to kind of really think about how you feel about these things and kind of talk through it. But I mean, ultimately, how I felt was knowing that I wasn't adding more was very peaceful, but it was hard to do that. So it's kind of almost a counterintuitive, like counteractive. I knew where I was headed was a good place, but it was not easy to get there. So it's like I'm, climbing Mount Everest, even though the top of Mount Everest is going to be awesome, but it's still hard to get there. It doesn't make it any easier.
Oh, of course. Yeah, just the challenge of the trip itself, and making that commitment up front, and then making the commitment to not waver from the commitment. Pretty huge. Totally understand that. And then you finished college and you got into your first job or two. And at what point did your debt situation actually reach your target of zero debt?
So we graduated in May of 2013. I kind of bounced around for a few small jobs for about a year, and then I landed a big main job, and I worked there for 6 years. But we had paid everything off in January of 2017. So it took another 3.5, 4 years to really get everything paid off. But that first year out of school, we were just kind of treading water because I was just hitting those small jobs. I wasn't making enough to barely keep us going. But once I got that main job, I was able to work my way up in that job and make some extra cash on the side and get it knocked out. So while having 2 more kids and adding a couple other things in there.
Of course. So now you have a family of 5, debt-free for 3.5 years or so?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
The only thing we have now is our house that we just finished building. So.
Okay. Yeah, but the house is a capital asset, right? So although it's debt, it's a different kind of debt. It's more of a productive debt scenario. That's very cool. So how would you say, I know that you indicated the journey was pretty difficult. You probably felt like you were all wound up and tense during that time period as you were going through it. But how does it feel now where you're debt free? You don't have nearly as much pulling at you, and you're much more flexible to handle disturbances and even the current economic situation as it comes.
Absolutely. I think it's critical because I mean I lost that job that I had for 6 years back in October of last year. And so, I started my business and then I worked just another job just to kind of keep things going. And I didn't like that job. I really was actually beginning to hate it. I hated the atmosphere. And so ultimately what the no debt and that strain was not there. So I could make the decision, hey, I'm going to take a pay cut, like 50% pay cut, after I've already lost the original job and lost a pay cut there. So I went from making 80 to almost just under, right around 30 now on a salary level, because I don't have to worry about that while I build the business and I get it going on the side. So it gives you it gives you those options and that piece of, I don't have to have this major job to feed my family. Like if I lost that job at 80 and had to go find another $80,000 job, I think it would have been a lot more stressful, and especially if I didn't have any money in the bank to cover the month or two that in the middle that I didn't have the job. So
of course,
unemployment is not going to cover 80 grand. So you're still going to be hurting even if you try and do unemployment. So
definitely, and having the flexibility, no debts and no payments really required except for your home.
That was it.
At all. Yeah. And I can really appreciate that flexibility. I was personally in a situation where I simply had to find a job of similar income to be able to make the transition. Of course, I had a move included at the time, but still, like you say, with having the financial freedom, then that gives you options, which gives you some level of security, and that definitely speaks to calmness from my point of view.
Absolutely, and I think we talked a few minutes ago, but me not really paying attention to that calmness or that self-preservation in ourselves so much until recently when I lost that job. This last year, I really dove into that self-evaluation, self-awareness, and really being in tune with myself to know kind of where I'm feeling, and trying to find that calmness, because I think it's super key in anything you do. I've always had that right mindset, I guess, but it's always been a struggle to, continue it or put it on that for everybody else. And because I never knew where I was. And I think that was the biggest key.
Yeah, the self-awareness is critical from my point of view, finding your own center, if you will. I'm just curious, what caused you to kind of make the shift from just running and gunning to becoming more self-aware and putting more of your focus on knowing where you're coming from?
Well, I lost that job, and it really destroyed my self-value that I thought I had. Because I helped that company grow from 3 employees to 12, being the main source of hiring and firing and managing everything going on. But in that process, I was fired, but I was, and so it just kind of destroyed that self-value. Like I felt like I didn't have any value anymore. And so it really started making me think about, but the one thing I remember my boss saying when we talked that last day was, he told me not to let this define who I am. And obviously I was not in the right mindset to listen to that at the time, but over time I've really thought about that, and it really showed me like that's not who I am. I made some mistakes. I can learn from them. And I'm actually, my business now is a lot of what I'm doing today is because of that opportunity. I'm writing a book on communication and how it plays a big factor in our lives. And I think a lot of my issues were from lack of communication at that job. And so on my part and other people's at the same time. So I think that's where I started really diving into who I am to know where I can go forward, because I stopped. Like my self value was just gone. And I, like, even to my family, was like, now, my kids can't look up to me. I'm not the best father. I've got to go do this and do that. And even though the one thing was the financial side was there, like I had the peace there. So I didn't have to necessarily worry so much about the finances, but it was more of a, what does my wife think about me? What do my kids think about me? And that type of thing. So it really hit me hard and made me start thinking about myself a little bit more.
A couple of huge key points there. One is the definition of self-worth and self-value, right? Where so many of us tie that into our external items or external influences or forces, like the workplace or the prestige of the title we have or where we work. And then the other aspect of just being human, right? We all make mistakes. Yeah. Sometimes those mistakes have a cost, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything beyond the cost in the moment. And like you say, that shouldn't define us at all. So if I could ask, in your coaching, who do you find that you're resonating with the most, and who are you working with the Ramsey principles and the other elements of your coaching programs?
So yeah, I went through Ramsey's training to go and do the financial coaching. So I have all of that, but my target audience, my target client would be the married couples that are struggling to communicate around finances. I've been able to help them with their communication outside of the finances too, but we kind of center everything around finances just because that's where my expertise is. But it's really been a big joy of me to actually reconnect some couples together that have struggled their entire marriage life to communicate about finances, and actually being able to bring them down, kind of sit them down and really have those honest conversations with each other, to break these things down so that they can move past them and actually find their togetherness of calmness and peace and freedom, and kind of look forward instead of always having to live in the moment. They can look forward to their retirement dreams and their retirement goals and kind of really see where they want to take things from there. But if you're always stuck in the moment, you can't do that, and you're going to be struggling just to kind of make things keep going at that rate.
I understand that. That's super valuable. So you're talking actually way beyond finances or even financial freedom or getting rid of debt, but you're talking about rebuilding marriages and taking away two major sources of conflict, right? The financial conflict, which is so common, especially these days, with all the economic strain and the stress level in a lot of different areas, as well as just the avenue of communication and the aspect of folks that are having to work a little extra hard to make ends meet. But with your support, able to really address both. I wonder if you could you give maybe an anonymous example of a couple that you worked with sometime recently, and where they started and what they were able to discover through your process?
Absolutely. So we had a client come in, or it was actually just a potential client at the time, and she had talked to a couple of the coaches, and I had talked to her over the phone, and she had actually canceled the consult she had already scheduled with them, and we got our schedule, we got through it, and we were on the Zoom call, and it felt like I was just a referee of them just back and forth, just like everything that was said was an attack. And so, at that point, you're never going to get anywhere. And so you have to be able to have an honest conversation to get any progress moving forward. So what we were able to do is take the first couple sessions, and instead of worry about finances, I was like, we got to get the communication piece intact and started before we can even start talking about budgeting and how to come together on that topic. So at that point, we took the first couple sessions, and I was working with a marriage counselor at the time, and they were helping me kind of dive in a little deeper. I do a lot of the straight communication stuff, but they kind of get into other issues as they come up and stuff like that. So we spent the first month and a half on communication and relationship, because they came from first, they both had first marriages with other kids, and they were kind of combining again. So they've already had this time of managing their finances themselves and having to come back together and now trying to reestablish a relationship around money. And so they had all these different views, and that's where I think that they were just trying to, it was either his way or her way, and there was no in between. And but now they actually just bought a house and just got able to move into it. And I just kind of talked to them about a week or two ago, and I mean they're still working on the communication. It's not a one and done thing, but we're actually able to look at the budget and actually start combining those thoughts without me feeling like I'm a referee in the conversation, kind of throwing the flags like, you can't say that, you can't do, that's where I felt at first. But now it's a lot calmer, a lot more, more of an honest conversation of, hey, this is my viewpoint, this is yours. Now, how do we connect and really combine those to make one new viewpoint, or one viewpoint from the family aspect, not from each other's past experiences?
I got you. I see how that can be more complicated, where you've got kind of two family ideals coming together into a new marriage, and then having to reintegrate and resolve that. I'm sure that your input was super helpful in helping to bring them closer together. When you take a client relationship like that, about how long does that process, or that your systematic approach, how long does it take?
So my typical program is 7 months. If we meet once a month, or depending on what tier of my program you do. But if I do the consult and I know we have to dive into a lot more communication, then I usually add the first 2 months will be 2 visits a month or 2 sessions, so that we can dive into that communication problems before we get into the budget. And I just basically tell them to keep doing what they're doing on the budget. Don't add any more debt. Don't add any more major decisions. But let's try and focus on this communication piece before we dive into the budget. So it may take a 7-month process into a 9 or 10, just depending on the couple. So it really, that consult, the kind of strategy call is where I really decide, hey, I can see there's some issues there. We really need to take a look at that before we dive into the budget and dive into some of the financial goals that they may have. So
I got you. And that way you tackle all of the different elements at the same time.
Yeah, because if we dive into the budget right off the bat, then they're just bickering at, they want to spend $30 on this, he wants to spend $30 on that, and that's, our problem is not the $30. The problem is they can't even say, hey, okay, let's spend this on that and this on this. Like they're not even wanting to do that. So we got to get them to a point where they can at least agree on some new level that they weren't able to before.
Understand. Well, that is very valuable, and I appreciate how you opened up that process of how you coach families through these difficult situations, supporting communication and stronger communication, as well as eventually finding their way to financial freedom. So, Zach, I really appreciate those insights that you're sharing, and I can see the powerful connection of both communication and financial freedom to the eventual calmness that now the whole family can appreciate. I did want to display your contact information for the audience in case they might wish to reach out to you. And here's Zach's info here at aafinancialcoaching.com. Let me just restate that for the audio, at aafinancialcoaching.com. Zach, it's been such a pleasure having you with us today.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. It's been pretty good.
All right. Thanks so much. And I hope we'll reconnect with you at some point in the future and hear how your coaching business is growing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zach. And for the Center of Calmness, I'm DK Warner.